We like AI.
We do.
Yeah.
We forces the. I mean, that's the real term. I think it's a little harsh word. We compel our students. We know we require it. We do. I apologize, students. No, I don't, because you need these skills. Chandler, Merkley, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to tell us about your life, your career, and what a business analyst does.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students that were in business management, but they've actually gotten rid of that degree. They've renamed it, rebranded it into business analysis.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think students necessarily understand the difference or why that change was made. So we're hoping to get a little bit of insight on that from you. So first question, this one's probably the most important.
Okay.
With the fate of the universe on the line, what karaoke song are you choosing?
Oh, man. I mean, my go-to almost my entire life has always been Play That Funky Music, White Boy.
Go-to.
That has been my go-to.
That's incredible.
Since I was probably in second grade. There's a video somewhere out there of me doing in like a second grade talent show. I think I was lip syncing, not karaoke, but I will full on karaoke.
Did you tell
That's
him
amazing.
at
No.
the end of this that he actually had to sing this to us?
Oh, right.
Oh,
Yeah,
happy-
absolutely. We're going
happy
to. That's incredible.
So I want to know more about you.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you do. What does a typical day in your life look like?
Yes. So in my current role, I'm actually a product manager. But I mean, I have been on all sides of the data coin, if you will. So I've also had a background in the business intelligence and business analysis world, then into more technical skills like data engineering. So day to day, though, I'm essentially making decisions using data. So I have to understand the data. I have to ask questions, and then I have to go and essentially problem solve and investigate. So day to day, it's just this constant game of, getting to ask a question or being asked a question and then going and finding the answers. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, so we constantly are hearing this. Your interview actually starts at the beginning of our guest speaker series, but throughout this guest speaker series, we're going to be hearing so many different roles and industries focusing on data. Data this, data that. We need to always be analyzing the data.
Yeah.
So why is data analysis such a fundamental skill in the business world?
Yeah, I mean, business essentially is all about numbers, right? And so you want to be making data-driven decisions because other than that, you're essentially running off of feeling. Maybe you're just basing it off of anecdotes. And a lot of times, anecdotes are the things that are the noisiest. It's the customer who's maybe making a lot of noise, or it's the problem that you have to deal with on a regular basis. So it feels really important to you, but the data may not actually validate that it's that big of a deal for the business as a whole. It may be a small segment of the big picture. So data allows us to kind of take ourselves out of it a little bit and take a more empirical approach and kind of understanding, well, what are we actually driving at here? We're trying to create more value or whatever we're trying to solve for. Are we trying to drive sales? Are we trying to drive customer satisfaction? Whatever the case may be, we have to have the numbers to back up, whatever we're trying to solve for. So yeah, it's this constant game of making the right decision based on good data, essentially.
Which obviously applies to any career,
Yes,
any
absolutely.
industry. And that's why, it really does become so essential and ubiquitous now in business.
So you talked
100%.
about having good data. So it sounds like there must be a good story behind not having good data.
Yes. I mean, I see it, I still see it all the time, essentially. And a lot of times you'll have maybe a leader, or like I said, maybe it'll be someone who has had to deal with a escalated issue. And so it becomes, red flags, right? Everyone starts panicking, or it creates a lot of noise. And it can create these sort of, off the cuff or sort of flying at the hip, shooting off the hip decisions that end up creating a lot of problems downstream. And you end up building maybe a bunch of exceptions that don't need to be there, which just makes the process so much more complicated. By having these sort of gut reactions to a problem, you actually end up creating a lot more problems down the line. Because again, you're not necessarily making a data-driven decision. You're making this sort of emotional decision based on, well, this person called me and they're important and they yelled at me, you know, and that doesn't feel great. But sometimes you need to take that step back and maybe do a deeper dive and dig into that issue. And again, using data to help then make a correct decision. You know, maybe this is an actual problem. We validated it is. And even better, here's our solution, and we can track that as we kind of move forward and see the progress over time. So that's the other, you know, huge key is as you're solving problems, you want to, it's sort of using the scientific method, right? You're going to go in with a hypothesis, and you're going to be able to use data to validate or critique that hypothesis, you know, as you go along, solving whatever problem you're trying to solve for.
A lot of students are trying to avoid science by getting a business degree. So
That's fair.
I get. So speaking of, when you were college age, I don't imagine this was the position you wanted to go in or expected to be in. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, no. A lot of it is just because I didn't know what any of this looked like. I didn't know it existed.
Sure.
What I quickly found, though, as I was starting in my career, is I liked solving problems. I liked being curious. I liked getting to ask and answer questions, which is sort of how I found myself kind of just naturally going down this path, because it's essentially a role where you're constantly problem solving and getting to take on new and interesting challenges all the time. So that's what engages me.
Yeah.
And so while when I was college age, this was not where I would have envisioned myself ending up, it also has made total sense, and I've never regretted sort of going down this path.
Yeah. And just to interject there real quick, a lot of our I would say 95%, no, maybe 100% relate to that sentiment. I never expected to be here. I found something that interested me. I followed that. Yeah. So we have a slew of students who don't know what they want to do. They meet with their academic advisor and they get tossed into this major of business analysis. Yeah. What advice would you give to a student who is kind of being put in here with an uncertainty about what they want to do in the future?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to like being curious. You know, especially when I was first starting out, you'll find that there's always opportunities at companies to ask questions and problem solve, no matter what your role is. You know, even if you're entry level, a lot of the time that means you're working on the front line. And you're going to have unique perspectives and unique experiences being in that position that, you know, the executive people aren't necessarily going to have. And so if you come in and you're kind of asking questions about, well, why do we do this process this way? Would it make more sense to try and do it this way? And maybe even get the opportunity to try and implement some of your ideas. And people are going to see that. People will take notice of that. And it's always, you know, appreciated by leadership when they have people coming to them and saying, you know, I was noticing this process just doesn't seem that efficient. It takes me a bunch of time. And I was actually thinking, what if we tried it this way? And they're going to love hearing that. They're going to love that perspective. They may not always take your ideas, and that's okay. You got to also learn how to handle criticism well, because they're going to have different perspectives than you. But I think that will be a huge, you know, boon to whatever career you decide to do. And it's honestly going to just kind of help you find your path. If you are coming in with this curious mindset and kind of always asking questions and then looking to grow and develop yourself. You know, when you find something that maybe piques your interest, you know, ask yourself what skills you might need to develop to follow that path. And we live in an incredible time where any information you want is at your disposal. You're kind of your only limit. I self-taught myself most of the skills I have. I self-taught myself SQL and Python, you know, because I wanted to get better at doing data analytics and learning how to manipulate data. And there was just a slew of resources available to me online. Most of it was free. So it's just kind of this constant drive of wanting to learn and challenge myself. And I think you'll find that will benefit you no matter what you're doing. And again, I think it'll just kind of help you find where you want to go. You'll sort of fit in.
So as we've been talking, we've heard data this, data that, data decision making. Yeah. So why is data, the new data analysis, the new fundamental skill the students need to have.
Yeah, I mean, no matter where you are in an organization, data is going to play a role. So whether that means you're more on the front line, you're more interacting with customers, there is so much data that you're going to just be working with. You're going to, need to know who that person is. You're going to need to know what they want. So even at that basic level. And then as you kind of maybe move into more strategic roles, data just becomes so vital. Like I was saying, to making good decisions, understanding how the decisions you're making are going to impact the business, and it's just kind of this key skill that you're going to use kind of no matter what role you end up in at a company. And I think it's really important to understand how to read data, how to also understand how data can be manipulated. Data is, we like to say data is truth, but in reality, truth is kind of what you want to make it sometimes with data, for better and for worse. I've been in a few situations where leaders were incentivized to essentially have bad data. They wanted to make themselves or their department look better. And when I was in a role, as someone in business intelligence, we'd have to come in and challenge them and actually say what the way you've manipulated the data here is just incorrect. So, maybe you're in a role where you're gonna have to spot those kind of things. And my role there was to defend the business. And this was a leader who was essentially going to be making decisions that could harm the business in the long run. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think about how Kevin Durant and I have scored the same amount of points in the Olympics thus far.
Yeah.
And how that is a truth in data that might make me look better at basketball than I really am.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. You can tell. It's amazing the stories you can tell with data.
Yeah.
Going with stories, I imagine
Yeah.
you're a great storyteller because I think that's a skill you have to have.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I've sort of gotten down this path of maybe being a little more technical with some of my skills, but a lot of the time I'm then talking to business leaders or to customers who don't necessarily have these technical skills. So being able to go in and present the data and tell the story in an accurate way, but also in a way that they can understand or that's more relevant perhaps to whatever their role is. That's also a very critical skill. Having these sort of people skills, being able to communicate and explain to someone who isn't necessarily going to have the same technical background that you might, or even just a different perspective. Everyone in an organization is going to be looking at things a different way from a different lens. They're trying to maybe solve different problems, but at the end of the day, you're all working together. So being able to come in and explain your perspective and why it may impact them or why it should matter to them is, I think, a critical skill to have.
All right, Chandler. So what trends and developments in business analysis or just the industry in general excite you the most? And what would you tell students who are trying to catch that wave and be prepared for it by the time they graduate?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hottest buzzword right now, of course, AI.
Of course.
I will say, though, it has made a very big impact on my day-to-day life. I have gone from spending, maybe hours actually writing out lines of code to spending minutes, essentially going to an LLM and having code written for me. Of course, I still need to know the right questions to ask. I'm still getting to build on all that experience I've developed over the years, but it's just essentially made me more efficient. It sometimes it can help fill in maybe some of those holes in my skill set that I might have. So I think it is a tool to learn. I think it's like anything, it's a tool. And it has strengths, it has weaknesses, it has things it's great at, things it's not so great at. So I think coming in and not being afraid of it and also not seeing it as this omnipotent, it's going to solve every problem for me, but just understanding that it has power, it has, versatility, and it will just make you more efficient if you learn how to use it.
We like AI.
We do. We forces that's the real term. I think it's a little harsh word. We compel our students. We know we require it. We do. I apologize, students. No, I don't, because you need these skills. But for a student who wants to develop an AI proficiency, again, with an uncertainty of exactly what to do,
Sure.
what would you recommend a student do to play with AI or play with data within AI or
Yeah.
write the code that you're mentioning? Like, what's some good sandboxing that they can do?
Yeah, and I mean, this is sort of a thing I've done as I've learned any sort of new skill to apply to data, is start with what you know or what you're interested in. So even if you're just going to AI and, you ask it questions about sports data if you want, if that's what interests you, or if that's just what you already are really aware of, because you're really going to quickly be able to pick up on when it's wrong or when something feels off, right? Because you know what should be correct. So you're going to have this nice built-in gut check on your assumptions. That's something that I've constantly done, when I've been learning any new skill, is just applying it to something maybe fun or something that I just already know a lot about. I use sports as an example because I love sports statistics. I'm a big nerd. So, when I was first learning, for example, this is going way back to when I was first starting like data analytics and learning like Excel, and like getting good at spreadsheets and learning how to do formulas. I was taking sports data and learning how to manipulate it. And it was, it sounds really silly, but it was a lot of fun, and again, and I also knew when the outcomes looked correct. There was this built-in gut check of going, well, hold on. No, they did not score 150 points in a basketball game, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of that. So that's the other reason I say start with stuff because it's just going to help you learn faster. You're going to spot problems, that much sooner. So yeah, and then from there, it's always best to, if you have a real problem to try and solve, that's always great as well. And just throw yourself into it. There's no better way to learn. Yeah.
So the big networking question, because
Yeah.
we tell our students from day one they should be networking with each other.
Yep.
Okay. So if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice about building a professional network, what would you give yourself?
Oh, man. I've honestly had pretty good luck with my network. I think it always comes down to, the advice I would give is just being kind. There are going to be times when you're working and dealing with people, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to have these conflicts, whether that's just personality or maybe a problem that you're trying to solve with somebody. And I've always, there's definitely, when I was younger, I probably could have done better at just being nice and being humble, realizing that you are going to be wrong a lot of the time, and that is okay. Other people are also going to be wrong a lot of the time, and that's okay as well. I think the goal is, learning to be a good collaborator, learning to be a good teammate. And at the end of the day, I think people remember a lot more about what they felt about a person rather than maybe the results that they generated on a day-to-day business. And so, I have, I don't know, should we go into network stories? Do you want to?
Let's do some network.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, and maybe just to tee it up a little bit too.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying about being kind, because I think networking can feel really stiff, really
Yeah.
disingenuous,
For sure.
and almost political, and like an agenda. Like, I'm getting to know you to
like-
get something.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of date sometimes. Like really stilted small talk.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah. Well,
Yeah.
from that lens, when you're building relationships,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear some of your stories.
Yeah, listen, you're not going to click with everyone. It's like anything else in life. It's a relationship, and you're going to find some people that you just mesh really well with in a professional environment. But at the end of the day, I think you can always be polite. I think you can always try and put your best foot forward in professional environments, and just understand that you're always going to have different experiences and different perspectives than other people. And it's important to listen and be receptive to those different experiences and perspectives, even if at first they challenge a lot of your assumptions or you think that just sounds wrong. I think it's always important to keep an open mind. And even if you end up, feeling like, well, maybe I can just ignore that perspective. Sometimes that's okay too.
Yeah.
But I think it's always important to be challenging yourself. And, I think that's one of the best ways you grow is when you have those moments of like, well, that doesn't sound right to me. And then really dig into those feelings and talk to that person. Ask them how they got to this conclusion, or why are they approaching this problem this way when it seems so counterintuitive to how you would approach it? I think some of those experiences where I've done those types of things have actually ended up being some of my best learning experiences, where I go, oh, I've never thought of that way. I'll try that next time, and it works out great. Or you try it out and go, no, my way was actually better, but that's great. You've whatever the case is, you've sort of validated it or learned. So I think that's always a great exercise.
So when you've done that relationship building in that way, just like you described, have you seen that lead to opportunities for advancement or growth or job positions? How has that benefited your career trajectory?
Yeah, 100%. So one of my favorite stories, it's actually the job I currently have. So I heard about the position from a friend of mine who I've worked at with several companies. And so he essentially knew I'd be a good fit because of, previous roles we'd had together. And funny enough, my reporting bosses were people I'd worked with almost 8 years ago. Completely different company, completely different industry, but they knew me and they knew what kind of a worker I was. So we went out to lunch. I essentially filled in that time that we hadn't been working together and let them know the skills I had developed in the meantime. They let me know what the role they needed filled. I said, yeah, I think I'd be a great fit at that. And they said, great, you're hired. They made me an offer on the spot.
You completely skipped the entire interview
process. I never even had to prove that I could do what I wanted to do.
No, I'm pointing at
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, see that's what we're talking about, though. We talk about this in 3890, how this type of relationship building can completely avoid the frustrating process of applying, and there's 200 resumes and it's been open for 2 months, it's like all of that frustration. But it's such a good example. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great story.
I think a lot of the time when you're in an interview, it's not necessarily about the skills. I mean, that's of course always important. You're going to have some baseline knowledge for the job. But a lot of the time, it's just about personality and understanding, are you going to be a good fit? Or are you going to be someone who we can come in and teach? Because no matter how experienced you are, every company is going to be doing things slightly differently than the company you worked at before. Every company is going to have some proprietary technology and tools that you're going to have to learn. So really what people care about is, are you going to be a good teammate? Are you going to be someone who I'm going to enjoy seeing at least 40 hours a week? The reality is you're going to be talking with and engaging with some of these people more than some of your friends and family. So it always helps if you can get along, or at the very least, build and be a successful team. So
that's always an aha moment to students when I tell them, you will spend more time with people that you work with than you do with your loved ones.
Yeah, it's not great to hear sometimes, but it's true. And your days will be far better if you enjoy working with those people as well. I mean, that's also, I think, a critical part of interviewing from your perspective is, am I going to enjoy working here? Do I think I'm going to fit in with this leadership style or this company culture? There's been several jobs I have just flat out decided I didn't want after going through interviews. Because I just realized it's not going to be a good fit for my personality or the way that I like to work, and might as well not make it painful if they decide to hire me and I work there for a few months and decide, I knew all along I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are it's like, what our curriculum is without even talking about it, because these first 5 weeks that students have been going to leading up to this interview, they've done so much self-reflection and learning about what their strengths and skills and personality are, so that they can discern whether something will be a good or bad fit for them. Obviously, that's a journey they'll go through their entire college career and once they get into the professional field, but starting now can just save them so many bad opportunities that they probably should have passed up on because they know themselves well enough to know that.
It's okay to pass up an opportunity is what I hear you saying.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I think you'll know while you're interviewing that you'll be able to feel out pretty quickly. Either you're going to clash too much with the leadership and their approach to things, or maybe you're just going to feel like, I will have no way to develop and grow myself here. I'm going to come in and just not be able to constantly challenge and engage myself. And maybe that's not what you're looking for. But I think you should always hopefully be looking for, a culture and a fit where you're going to say, well, I might have some chance to at least get to develop my skills. And maybe that means I'm just going to be here for a few years and then move on. Sometimes that's okay too. But I think it's, as long as you always feel like I'm going to be able to learn something new here, I'm going to be able to get a different perspective that's going to make, me more valuable down the line. I think that's an okay perspective to have as well. Sometimes jobs are going to be stepping stones, and that's totally okay. I think those core things I was talking about are still always going to apply. Be kind, be a good teammate, be responsible. That's a huge part of networking as well, is committing to what you say you're going to do, because people do remember that. People remember if you're unreliable. There's been people I've worked with over the years who I would never want to work with again. Yeah. Because it was me constantly having to pick up after them. And no one likes doing that.
I get you. There are some people that I know where they work, and I will never work there.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, that's it's a huge part of, again, building that network is just being reliable. And I think that's also a critical skill to have.
Okay, so speaking about our networks.
Yeah.
So we're going to have some students who who are interested in going into business analysis.
Yeah.
How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. I'm just Chandler Merkley. I don't think there's too many of us out there. I do have a profile picture.
And it looks like you.
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay.
I think. I have a beard, so yes. Should probably update it. But yeah, absolutely. Totally feel free to reach out to me there, send me a message. I'm happy to field questions and hopefully help people feel out if it's going to be a good fit for them. Like I said, I think if you're someone who loves to problem solve, loves to challenge yourself and like be learning new things constantly, I have never stopped learning. I'm always having to learn a new technology, a new skill, and that's what excites me. I really enjoy that challenge. But it's also satisfying that I get to build on my previous experience and knowledge as well. That's always there. But it's this, it's this exciting journey of always getting to push yourself. And, I've never truly felt bored during this career. And if I have, I moved on to a different company and I quickly found, all sorts of new exciting challenges and opportunities.
Which is surprising because business analysis does sound very boring.
Yeah.
And yet, the exciting problem solving is, is there.
Sometimes it might sound like a stale issue. We need to drive up sales by X amount or whatever. Maybe that sounds like a stale problem, but you'll find that the actual work and getting in there and finding the data or getting to plug it in and see results. That will always feel exciting. That aha moment when you finally get the puzzle pieces to click together, and maybe you've been staring at a line of code or staring at this report forever, trying to figure out why these numbers aren't looking the way they should, and then you finally find that little missing piece. And man, that's such an awesome feeling.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, Chandler, thank you so much for kicking off our speaker series. We really appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.